is about storytelling. So, storytelling is a vital part of how we communicate information in a variety of ways. As Dr. Emil Stitza states in her writing Narrative Theories and Learning in Contemporary Art Museums, a theoretical exploration. The Art Museum, and the Contemporary Art Museum in particular, implies a certain frame for the visitor and a certain set of expectations, an openness of interpretation, a type of experience, a kind of authorial voice. Museums have long used narratives in a way to communicate with their public. So storytelling is a way of presenting ideas to people, and it is a complex process of conveying information to the masses. Peter Hollendale presents in his theory that there are three levels of ideology that go into text storytelling. So there's the ideology that is your personal ideology, beliefs and values from your family. Then there's the ideology of the culture you grew up in, and the ideology in which the author, the narrator, and in this case the curator, wants the audience to get. It is the lens they want to show people how to look at various works of art. So for these various works of art, we see beautiful ornate pieces of furniture, paintings in beautiful gold gilded frames, couches that are very ornate, paintings on the wall. So the way that we read works in the museum is impacted by these three ideologies. So if you look at images from the Detroit Institute of Arts, for example, you'll see a specific narrative going on. For example, the way that European art is shown in a particular way. The presentation is telling us how to read and how to interact with the objects, how to understand it. They're all beautiful, they are all large, they are all very ornate, and look at the walls, look at the placement of seating. There are benches, there's sculpture, the frames are beautiful, the background is beautiful, as well as the art itself. Now, let's look at the Native American art. Native American art is more craft-based. These are textiles, there's beading, there's some weaving. It sends a very different message. There's a visual language here going on. Look at the background. It's not ornate. They are in glass cases. I understand why that is. The display cards are even paper. They are not displayed in the same way. The work from these artisans is a visual language all in its own, and it should be showcased in much the same way that the artwork from the European and the Americans are shown as well. I want to also point out to you that the Native American artwork is way up here at the top of the map on level 1 in the museum. Where's the American art? Way over here on level 2, almost immediately away from Native American art. There is African American art next to the American art, but if you look at ancient Greek and Roman is here, European, medieval, and Renaissance. Italy is over here. There's more African American art way over here. And then on the third floor is the Dutch Golden Age and fashionable living. That in itself sends a message as well, because we also have on the other side of the museum art of Asia and Africa as well. So that is also very important. It also is part of the narrative. So curating an exhibit or a gallery showing is a way to tell a story. In his article, Curating as Meta-Narrative, Pekko Bargan points out every exhibit is a text considered from a semiotic point of view, a message that has been constructed in any medium and may be typographic, oral, or visual in nature. Let's tie this back to Peter Hollendale's idea that, he's talking about ideologies and the way that we construct information. Hollendale talks about ideology, and that ideology is overt and covert. Meta-narratives, Bargan goes on to say, meta-narratives are philosophies, theories, ideologies, discourse, or ideas that provide a totalitizing, authoritarian, and comprehensive explanation and legitimation of the world in terms of our historical experience or knowledge. Okay, so looking at these images here on the screen, this is china from Europe. Fine china. It's porcelain. It's seen as having more value in Western culture. Non-Western cultures treat porcelain very differently. They treat them like we treat like plastic to-go containers. Look at the way that they are shown on the shelves. There's glass shelves. They're separated out. They're just showcased beautifully against this white backdrop. There's even a table here in this section where you can sit down and watch them set the table. All right, here is where the native pottery is. It's up against a very stark contrast to the other. I don't know if this is meant to look more like it's natural or something, but it's very similar background to the other Native American works. This looks like a display board in a classroom. That's what kind of material this looks like. So this pottery, it's porcelain, it's mica clay. It's very precious to the Native people. And it doesn't have as much value to Western culture as it does to what we consider non-Western cultures. But in the middle of this display is this beautiful black piece of pottery. This is a modern piece from Nathan Youngblood. He is a traditional Pueblo artist in working in this traditional Pueblo medium. I'm not sure why it's here. It's a modern piece. Question is, should it be here or should it be in the modern section? What is the narrative that the curator is trying to say here? And there can be several ways to look at this story, but to me it's as if this pot is from this nameless person of all these pots put here. That's not the narrative maybe that they created, but that's the narrative that oftentimes comes through. Okay? So we have to change the narrative. Institutions have to change the narrative. We as art students recognize this and know this and understand, there's different narratives, but not the average person that goes to the museum. So this is the Seattle Art Museum. It's showing works from the past and the present in one place. We have these totem poles that are from, primarily, totem poles are from the western side of the country, California, Seattle, Oregon. And then we have these cereal boxes that are from a very modern presentation, all together as one. We also have the Toledo Museum of Art. It's working on changing the narrative as well. They have a current show, of course you can't go, but it's up until December of this year, called Expanded Views 2. It's part 2, Native American Art in Focus, and this is taken from their website talking about Native American art. In recent years, the Toledo Museum of Art has sought to actively broaden its collecting efforts and exhibition programs to more inclusively and holistically represent a variety of cultural perspectives and traditions not included in the established art historical canon. And that's really important point here, that these were not in the canon traditionally. They're not artworks that were seen as art prior to a certain time period. Okay. Also, we're going to move to the Chicago Field Museum. They just opened their new show. It's called Absaraka Women and Warriors. I did reach out to Nina Sanders, whose photo is here, to talk to her about curating this show. I didn't hear back from her. I did find an interview with her, so I was able to hear her voice about this show. As curator, Sanders picked which items to include and wrote the text and narrative for the exhibit. She collaborated with more than 20 plus Absaraka contemporary artists and scholars sharing their art, including paintings, photography, beadwork, high-end fashion. So there's past and present in here. Historically, Native Americans haven't been allowed to represent themselves, Sanders said. They talk about Indigenous people like they existed in the past, and that's problematic. And that's a big part of the narrative, that Natives are not around anymore. or natives don't know how to talk about these works. She's talking about a part of the narrative that's missing, and that is the voice from the people creating the work, and the voice from the people who this is of their ancestors. This will change the narrative if this continues, if they continue to have Native people curating these shows. Back in November, the DIA did hire Danae D. Quintel, and she is not a Native person. But she does have a background in Native studies, so she's very qualified. And it's too early to see any new curatorial decisions because this is just November and we're only in April. But I do look to hope for the future that things will change. But overall, the issue is that until there are institutional changes to address the narrative that is currently in place, people will see the story as the same. If we change the narrative of what is art and what is craft, or what we need to value, then we change how these works are viewed. We place a ton of value on painting and sculpture, but not as much on the craft mediums because they are often created by women and minorities. This narrative comes from a male-centered world. The bottom line is our institutions need to do better when presenting craft mediums in conjunction with what they consider traditional art mediums as all one and the same: art.